My name's Davin with In Season Nevada. In this video, we're going to be going over my fishing calendar of what I think are some of the best bang for your buck things that you can do with your time starting in January and going through December. Time management is really important to me. It's why we've rebranded this channel from The Catch Today to In Season Nevada. See, when I was a young single guy who didn't value his time as much, I could just focus on whatever I wanted to catch or hunt or fish for on that particular day. But now that I'm a husband and a father, my time is much more scarce. So I need to be doing the most high value thing with my time that I can do in each season of life. So if that sounds like you and you want to get the most for your time, then watch this video. We're going to be going over the big picture and over multiple different species. If you want to see more detailed videos of other species, comment down below and we'd be happy to create those videos in the future. So with that being said, let's go into January and some of the best bang for your buck opportunities, and that is ice fishing. Now, there's different trout fishing opportunities in southern Nevada that aren't ice fishing related. There's a lot of areas that don't freeze over completely, and so there's some safe areas that you can stand on shore and cast into some open water. And then there's also areas that just don't freeze at all. As well as if you are going to go ice fishing, if you're not experienced, go with somebody who's experienced. I'm not encouraging you to do anything dangerous on this channel. That's not my goal here. Coming into February, we have the ice starting to thaw. Now, as the ice thaws, it gets a lot more dangerous, and so less and less people will be out there ice fishing. What I would encourage you to do is look for some of those areas that are safe on shore that you couldn't cast into in January, but now are available to be casted into starting in February. So something to just keep in mind is that more and more ice will be thawing in February. It's also a great time to do some gear review, because in March, we will have what I call banquet season, where a lot of wildlife conservation groups are doing their banquets in order to raise money and improve habitat so we have more fish to catch in years to come. We also have a lot of different fishing events that happen, like tournaments or club groups hosting different events or different community events that happen from March to June. So keep an eye out, because those are great opportunities to meet folks. In March, we also have what I call the pre-spawn. We have crappie, largemouth, bluegill, and smallmouth bass, all in this feeding frenzy that happens before the spawn. And so, in my personal opinion, I would focus on bluegill and crappie if I wanted to eat the fish, because bluegill and crappie spawn first. So they actually eat a lot of largemouth bass and smallmouth bass eggs, which we'll talk about later during the spawn on what you can do in the spawn to catch some big fish. But great time to catch your bluegill and crappie to reduce those populations and have more largemouth and smallmouth later on in the year. April and May is the spawn. There's a lot going on in these 2 months, and the reason why I lump these 2 months together is because depending on how far north you are or how far south you are, or if it's a warm year or a cold year, this can affect different spawn times. So we're not going to go into detail on every single fish here, but just know that in general, earlier on, it's better to catch bluegill and crappie for eating purposes. And then coming into the largemouth bass and smallmouth bass spawn, what I like to do is I actually like to use lures that look like bluegill and crappie, and you can catch some really large fish doing this. I encourage you to throw them back at this particular time period. That way they can continue to guard those nests and then catch and keep them in the post spawn, which is what I like to do. We also have the striped bass spawning. They spawn, in my opinion, at the end of May is when I see most of the spawning action happening. But again, that's in the lake that I fish for and just what I see happening most of the time. I'm not saying that they couldn't change the time of year that they spawn depending on if the lake temperatures were different. But I typically see striped bass spawning after the largemouth and smallmouth bass. Coming into June, we have a lot of exciting activity going on. We're in the post-spawn, so it's my favorite time to eat whatever species of fish I feel like eating or whatever species I catch, because a lot of those fish are done spawning and the next generation is already on track to replace those fish. So great time to eat some largemouth and smallmouth bass if that's what you like. We also have some great catfishing opportunities that happen in June. The catfish start to get more active as the water warms up. And so June is a great time to catch pretty much any fish, in my opinion. We also have trout stocking opportunities that happen in June. Trout stocking is when fish are raised in captivity and then released into the wild, whether it be an urban pond, a rural pond, or a lake. And so if you are a brand new fisherman, or you are a parent of a brand new fisherman, or you are taking somebody out for the first time, this is a really easy opportunity to catch some fish that aren't used to lures. And so while these fish might be small, they can still be really fun to catch. Coming into July, we have some really interesting things that happen. A lot of high elevation lakes become available to hike into. And so always check your local laws and regulations, but in general, a lot of these lakes will be available to hike into starting in July. So if you want to escape the crowds and get away from people, July is the time to backpack into the wilderness, get out there and get some fish while it's nice and warm outside, and escape the heat in Southern Nevada if that's where you live. If you want to escape the heat, but you don't want to throw on a backpack and go deep into the wilderness, a lake that I'm going to recommend is Cummings Lake for a few different reasons. The first reason is the lake's reputation has been destroyed over the last 20 years due to the introduction of pike. You might be saying, well, if the lake's ruined because of the pike, why would I fish there? Well, think of it this way. There's a lot less fishermen going to the lake than there has been in the past. This has led to some very large trout that are still in the lake and available to be caught. There's an abundance of largemouth bass that can be caught as well. It's still fun to catch the pike. So if you like some catch and release fishing, feel free to go out to Cummings Lake and do that in July to escape the heat. There's a bunch of different events that happen at the lake, and the town of Ely is only 15 minutes away. So this is a great opportunity for families to get away from the heat and go somewhere that's fun. Next, we're going to talk about the striped bass boil. Striped bass do feeding activity that most people in Southern Nevada refer to as boiling, which is the fish will sit in cold, deep water, and then as threadfin shad, this is their main food source, swim over them to avoid them, they will pin those shad to the surface of the water. When they do this and feed on the shad, it creates a lot of splashing activity that happens at the surface, and it can look like the water is boiling. So that's why people call it a boil. So just something to know that starts to happen in July. And this, in my opinion, is when the fish start tasting better. I'm not saying that you can't catch a skinny fish that's malnourished in July. You're just going to find more fish that are fat in July than fish that are skinny in July. And in my opinion, the striped bass fishing only gets better starting from July going to December. In August, I would say it's mainly just a continuation of July. A lot of the same fishing opportunities that exist in August also exist in July. So there's nothing really new to talk about in August, in my opinion. Next thing, we're going into September. This is one of my favorite times to fish for larger striped bass because they do migrate, in case you don't know. They migrate in and out of different feeding grounds. And so if you can find them in September, it's a great opportunity to stay on them and catch some bigger striped bass that other people aren't catching before everybody else finds out where they are and they start catching them too. Now, in October, I'm not saying that they're going to be ruining the fishing opportunities. I'm just saying that with more competition comes a higher level of difficulty in catching some of these larger striped bass. Another thing to note in September is the trout have mostly been stocked in most of the lakes that the Department of Wildlife wants to stock. I'm not saying that trout stocking activity doesn't continue to happen after September, but the vast majority of it is over. This means that going from September onward, the trout only get bigger. You're not going to catch smaller trout going into the end of the year. So it's a great opportunity to start trout fishing again if you don't want to catch small trout and you want to catch some larger ones. Coming into October, I call this the feeding frenzy. Pretty much every species of fish is at their peak of feeding before those colder fall months and those cold winter months ahead of us start to come in and change different feeding behavior. This is when most people have figured out where the striped bass are, and so there's a lot of competition for catching these fish. And oftentimes there's a scarcity mindset associated with this. I want to just give you a little public service announcement here. If you see a boil of striped bass and they are heading in a certain direction, instead of ramming your boat right through the middle of the boil, what I would recommend is you angle your boat and slowly approach the fish, and then let the boil pass you and catch fish as the boil passes you. Somebody else is already on a boil, realize that the fish are going to be avoiding their boat. So position your boat at a distance that's fair, where that boat will actually push striped bass towards your boat if you're fishing from a boat. If you're fishing from shore, it's oftentimes not a bad idea to just wait for boaters to pin the striped bass to the shoreline that you're fishing on. So we can all fish as a team. We don't have to compete against each other and ruin somebody else's fishing opportunity by running over a boil. Something just to know. All right. Coming into November, we have ice starting to form in certain areas of northern Nevada. This is a great opportunity to catch some big trout before they become inaccessible for a little bit of time. In December, we have what I call the last chance for striped bass. This is when the striped bass are at their fattest, and they will start losing weight in December, as well as start to migrate out of the main feeding areas. Where they go in December and into January, I don't know. I just know that you have a few lingering fish that are still in some of these feeding areas before they move out. And so just something that you should know about if you're fishing in Lake Mead or Lake Mojave. These lakes are absolutely massive, and so keeping track of the schools can be difficult starting in December. We also have a lot of holiday sales going on. Remember how I talked earlier in this video how a lot of those wildlife conservation groups are having their banquets in March, April, and May, and different events that are going on? Well, they put on those events for you guys, and there's a lot of recruiting that happens in December. I would encourage you, if you want to build deeper relationships with people and get invited on some really cool opportunities, find ways to give back and start building those relationships during these holiday sales, because a lot of these conservation groups want to recruit. So they're going to be out there handing out flyers. They're going to be out there talking to people in the month of December. So with that being said, look out. One of the conservation groups that I'm a part of is WIN, Wildlife Habitat Improvement Nevada. We're a multi-species conservation group, meaning we want to help both fish, ducks, birds, and big game animals. Now, if you want a very specific kind of fishing group, there's nothing wrong with that. Go join the group that you fit in with the best. But I'm just saying that WIN has an opportunity for you guys to network with some other fellow anglers and hunters. I do appreciate you for watching. Hope you learned something in this video, and I want you to be successful in every season of life. Have a great day.